We welcome you all. We hope you are enjoying the sessions of the conference.
When Professor Albert Einstein was asked by someone, "Professor, how do we improve the world?" Einstein's answer was very brief: we must improve people. Therefore, the only area where we can actually think of bringing about the change to eventually change society as a whole is in the area of educational institutions. Today, we take the opportunity to understand the impact of yoga in the field of education, not only in India, but also in France, through today's plenary session chaired by Dr. H.R. Nagendra. Dr. H.R. Nagendra holds a doctorate in mechanical engineering from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and is the president of the Swami Vivekanand Yoga Anusandhan Sansthan, popularly known as SVYASA. After receiving his doctorate, he served as faculty of the Indian Institute of Science in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. He then served as postdoctoral research fellow at the University of British Columbia in Canada. From there, he moved to the NASA Marshall Space Flight Center in USA as a postdoctoral research associate, and then to the Engineering Science Laboratory at Harvard University as a consultant. He subsequently was the visiting staff member at the Imperial College of Science and Technology in London. Since 2000, he has been serving as president at SVYASA in Bangalore. He is now the chancellor of SVYASA deemed university. He has published 30 research papers in engineering, authored and collected 110 papers on yoga, and co-authored several books and has guided nearly 20 PhD students. We would now like to introduce our plenary speakers.
Our first speaker is eminent educationist from France, Dr. Micheline Flak. Dr. Micheline Flak started her career as an English teacher. Inspired by teachings of Swami Satyanand, founder of Bihar School of Yoga, she realized that some applied yoga techniques could bring benefits to the educational system, from kindergarten to university level. Over the 40 years of experience, she met numerous obstacles but overcame them with all success. She founded a group called Research on Yoga in Education, also known as RAI. The organization has developed branches in Europe and other continents. It has trained thousands of educators and teachers. Dr. Flak's efforts were rewarded in 2013 when the French Ministry of Education issued a national agreement stating that yoga could be taught in all French schools. She also travels extensively as an international consultant in the field of yoga-based pedagogy. She's co-authored the book Yoga in School, which offers incentives and practical hints for implementing yoga in classroom contexts.
Dr. Ganesh Rao is an advisor to Kaivalyadhama, Mumbai, and a Board of Studies member at Kaivalyadhama, Lonavala. He is a professor of yoga and philosophy and is one of the most highly learned and experienced teachers of yoga in the country. He has a doctorate in philosophy and also holds a diploma in yoga education from Kaivalyadhama and Yoga Institute, Mumbai. He has conducted to date more than 13,500 sessions in yoga, covering all aspects of yogic practices. He has conducted several workshops and presented several papers on yoga at national as well as international conferences. He has published several articles in newspapers, journals, and books. He is distinguished a PhD guide at Mumbai University and Kavikul Guru Sanskrit University, Nagpur. He is visiting faculty in K.J. Somaya's Bharatiya Sanskriti Peetham and Center for Buddhist Studies, in Mumbai University, and in Kaivalyadhama, Mumbai and Lonavala for the teacher training courses of Yoga Alliance USA.
My dear brothers and sisters, elders, Tiwaraji, Amrutsuryananji, and all the galaxy of yoga experts and gurus, I'm so delighted to be here this morning, and we have a very wonderful plenary session today, essentially as to how yoga could be brought into education at the school level. We have the expert Flak, who is here, who has been working on this, and we have met several times earlier, and the wonderful book, Yoga in Education. My request to Micheline Flak to offer her remarks and presentation. Over to Dr. Flak.
Thank you. So it is a great honor for me to be invited to talk during this plenary, the 8th International Seminar in Kaivalyadhama. And I must say that I have reasons to rejoice when I compare the time we are living in with the time when I started having my first experiments of yoga in school, and that was in 1973. At that time, nobody could imagine the success, the worldwide movement that we can see now regarding yoga. Yoga implemented in all sectors of life, like banks, schools, hospitals, and stores, and everywhere. Not only, of course, in France, but everywhere throughout the world. And so it is my pleasure to congratulate all the speakers and all the people who are presenting the treasure of India, yoga. As for myself, I started in a high school in Paris, and one day it happened that I realized that the type of lesson I usually gave could not go on without a sort of pause. And that pause was because the children were coming from a gym class, which is a good thing, but they were red all over and wearing all the signs of weariness and sweat and everything. So I thought before starting the English lesson I should give them a moment of yoga. And then I asked them to put their elbows on the table and their hands over their eyes, or if they preferred, to put their arm on the table and their heads as birds do when they go to sleep, putting their heads under their wings. They were very surprised because in an intellectual setting like a classroom in Europe or anywhere, having a teacher telling them not to do anything, just relax, meant somehow an event. And they all looked at me first and then complied. And that's when the event started, that they accepted that moment of relaxation. And I was somehow so surprised to see how silent the class room was that I thought maybe I should use that silence to repeat the lesson while they were doing nothing. So I started reading the lesson sentence by sentence, observing a pause in between every sentence, and asking them to repeat in between. Mentally, I told them, repeat in your heads. And so the lesson went on, and when it had read it all over, I told them, now you will be able, when you are sitting up again, to answer the questions about the lesson. So I asked questions about the lesson they had just heard, and I was surprised to see that they all wanted to answer, which is not very common, as you may know if you are teachers. Because usually when you ask questions, some volunteer, but others don't. But here, the show was important because all the hands were raised. They all wanted to talk, and they didn't show any sign of shyness. So it means that the tensions, which are usual during a lesson, had been released. And so after that, I realized that it was a good way to enhance learning. Not only that, because you know we have noticed, all of us, that during the curriculum we ask for intellectual matters, mathematics, languages, grammar and so on, and we well consider that these matters, these intellectual matters, are subject matters taught at school, are much more important than other matters like singing or reciting poetry or well, drawing, art as a whole, which means that our system, educational system, is based on the intellectual quotient, that is the famous IQ. And it is something which I think goes against the fact that a human being is multidimensional. And in yoga, I had studied the great subject of koshas, the different departments of a human being. And the intellectual layer of that human being is not the only one. So I could consider that while the children were relaxing, some other parts of their bodies were ready to listen. That is, the intellectual layer outside is related to the pedestrian conscious mind, whereas there are layers closer to the subconscious mind which have got to be nourished. And silence might be one way to nourish those areas. I have also always been surprised to see how little children, 2, 3, 4, learn a language. Nobody teaches them grammar. And yet they can speak the most difficult languages in the world. And how can they manage to speak a language without going to school? It is because we have inside the possibility to derive another kind of attention which specialists have called a floating attention, and scientists have even devised means to connect this state of consciousness, this floating state of consciousness, to alpha waves. That is, slower waves than when the children, for instance, are learning an intellectual subject. So through this awareness, many psychologists, which I studied at the time, proposed, suggested new ways of learning which could be enhanced by singing, by doing sketches, roles, which are very funny, amusing, relaxing. And meanwhile, through this type of awareness, special awareness, some rules of grammar or some phrases which would be difficult to learn otherwise are becoming present to the mind whenever they wish to express something new. And it is a great surprise even for students to realize that they have learned something without knowing it. And that is not something which we can forget, we can ignore. because it is very useful even in the precincts of an ordinary school. So I tried, through various means offered by the science of yoga, to create a relaxed atmosphere in the classroom. And even before they got into the classroom, I asked them, how are you feeling today? Which meant that through a simple question, the teacher showed that he was aware of the emotional background of the children, or even their sensation, like, well, I didn't sleep enough last night because I watched a football match on television, you know. Then the children could express their feelings, and this opened up new channels in their body-mind complex. So I must say that the science of yoga that I experienced in the classroom was first experienced on myself. And I will insist later on the fact that in order to introduce yoga to children, the teacher must have a very profound experience of yoga himself. And I must say that on the days when I didn't have time to do my own practices, I felt that my gait, my pace was not as elastic as usual. And it is this suppleness, this way of being, which interact with the class. So during this period of experiment, I felt alone somehow. You see, the loneliness of the poor teacher who is doing something that his colleagues are not doing is well known nowadays. And nevertheless, I found that the children's joy in doing yoga was a sort of support which I always felt, as well as the support of my mentors, my masters. And for instance, I remember Swami Satyananda saying yoga is not only an heritage of the past, it is the culture of tomorrow. When he said that, we were in the 60s or 70s, and now that tomorrow is today, you see. But I believed, seeing the success of that implementation in my school, I understood this to be probably true. And also I had the opportunity to meet Tibetan masters. One of them, Lama Gwendun, gave me the white scarf when I told him that I was implementing yoga in school. Is it right? He said yes. So that was enough. The yes of such people helped me go on when it was so new, because I must say that at the time there were no books, no precedents. And since I could not go on my own, I asked the support of many colleagues whom I met, not in the schools, but on yoga mats, in yoga halls. And those people, of course, were having also some possibilities. Some of them were in the primary, some of the secondary, teaching not English but geography or other history. And so we created a sort of team meeting every week on Wednesdays. I can give you those details because they are very present to my mind now that I see that everybody is talking about yoga in schools. At the time, we were probably the only ones in Paris, at any way. And so when the word began to spread that we had experiments and that happened in a Paris school, and that, well, it was yoga entering that sector. Well, the heads started touring, and even abroad. And we started being invited to various countries, not through the agency of Éducation Nationale, but through the agency is a Miracle of Yoga International. So I accepted these invitations, and so I traveled far and wide. Along the way, a growing team of yogis, school teachers, and so on, wanted, as yoga-minded people would do, to support our work, and we were very grateful. We all felt very grateful to the immemorial science. And when I confess that 40 years ago, well, there were hardly any documents, so we thought maybe that was the time to speak, to give publications, and we did that. We published and we talked, but there was some misunderstanding about the word yoga. And so even my supporters, even in the school or at the university where I studied, told me, well, what you are doing, those breathing things and movements in the classroom to stretch the spine, the children are not sitting well, and so on. All this seems very good, but don't call it yoga. Well, I said, well, how do you want me to call it? Then they said, well, you might call it self-regulating exercises, or you call it body-mind system. And so write an article using this term. So I tried to write article not using the word yoga to comply with the university. And it was horrible. The text was ununderstandable. So I felt rather bad, and when I distanced myself from such proposals, others suggested that I use the word relaxation. That was a bit better, but I knew that the aim of yoga, especially at school, is not to relax. The aim of yoga is not relaxation. Relaxation is just a step towards a dynamic state which is called dharana, concentration. And so I worked a lot on that subject, and since my religion, like the religion of so many people nowadays, is science, I asked some doctors and people I knew in that field to tell me what changes happened in the brains of people who concentrated. And they gave me a lot of hints. You know, there are hormones which are created by focus. And those hormones help pratyahara. That is, when the people concentrate, these hormones help them to understand better, and because then they are not interested in what is going around. And so I understood that yoga can be presented in a scientific way. And that helped me a lot. Because even in the classroom with adolescents, I used some scientific demonstration in a simple way, which explained why it was important for them to practice yoga because it created certain waves in their brains which were conducive to better learning and so better results at their exams. And so when you speak like this to older students, you may be sure that they understand this as well as adults or even doctors. So we worked this way, and of course with years passing, more people got interested in it, and since we looked like ordinary people, we didn't look like hippies or outsiders, then the word was heard, and then we were able to create a group of research which is known as RAI, Research on Yoga in Education. And little by little, this group became to be known, and we started training students in teachers' training schools. Of course, we had attacks because, the institution is not, as you know, ready to accept innovation at first. I myself was very much interested in new ways, new days. And in the precincts of my schools, the children who did not have that Miss Flak as teacher knew me as a very special teacher teaching English through yoga. So they talked to their parents, and the parents came to the school, asked the principal what was that about, and if I was not making the children lose their time by doing some movements for which I was not supposed to be paid for. So I understood the meaning of that, and instead of doing the yoga in class in French, I did it in English, which brought about great progress in the knowledge of the body. Even small children knew every part of the body in English, which was a great step forward. And also, the people were afraid that the yoga I taught was a cult or a sort of religion they were a bit afraid of. So all this, you see, created a background of obstacles which we knew to be normal, and we did not forget to feel confident, because that's life. If you listen to what people tell you all around, you will never do anything. And I felt confident that the great gurus I had met were supporting us. So the press, the media, came to us. Once we were attacked on television. What's that going on in the field of our educational system? But in fact, that was the only time where I really felt very angry. Usually, journalists who came to my class, to our classrooms, were absolutely delighted to see the reactions of children, the way they interacted with the teacher and so on. And they said that if they had learned English the way those young ones learned English, they would speak it more fluently, which is, of course, a good thing for French people who have the reputation of not speaking English very well, as a whole, which is not true nowadays. At any rate, for the journalist, it was a scoop. You see, having a class where yoga was enacted was something which they liked very much. And so they wrote good articles where they showed the children standing on one foot in front of the blackboard or relaxing in the classroom. And in fact, some of them wrote articles and illustrated it in the way that you had the tables in the classroom and the children in the lotus pose sitting like this, you see. So that was a humorous illustration which had nothing to do with reality. But it was funny, and we enjoyed it anyway. So because of the success, which did not come all at once, but which spread quickly, we felt that we had to write a chart to avoid some difficulties which we would regret with regards to the way yoga could be wrongly understood. And so, because this is an important thing to have safeguards somehow, I will read and explain some of the rules that could be used to prevent wrong happenings regarding the implementation. So we have written about 7 guidelines, and they are standardized norms and methods to help the continued recognition of yoga. Some simple common sense principles which would serve as the basis for yoga in the school environment. These principles are readily acceptable to all partners and within the education, and easy to keep in mind, so I will enumerate them. The first one is that teachers should be properly trained before introducing yoga into school. They must have obtained a qualification from an appropriate authorizing body in this domain. It would be ideal if initial teacher training, ITT, institutions propose such a formation for future teachers, and I heard that this is what India is doing. I think it's absolutely the right thing, very wonderful. Now, the second thing concerns the risks and problems pertaining to let's say, first of all, the respiratory rhythm. The breath is so important that we decided that regarding primary and high school, even up to the age of 16 or 17, the pranayama exercises should not be introduced except for being aware of the breath. That is, a simple awareness of the breath operates a big change in the rhythm of the respiration as well as in the mind. And since both are so finely linked, it is very important that we should not miss the point and introduce some, comeback, you see, so that the children use this when they go to the swimming pool and they want to swim for a long time. That can be dangerous. So we think that teachers, that's what we thought. I mean, I don't know what you think, but we should not change the rhythm of breathing in schools, at any rate. And also with regards to Hatha Yoga, we found that some postures were not adequate. I mean, in workshops, not so much in the classroom, because children do not do a lot of forward bending asanas. But forward bending asanas, when they are done with force, where they are forced, are not good for the spine because the bones are not finished yet, and this could entail accidents. So again, I repeat, it is very important for teachers to have solid training in yoga before they start implementing yoga in schools. And also, I will speak highly of relaxation, because there is the fact that everybody knows that children are as much stressed as adults. And there are physical tensions which we can somehow abate through Hatha Yoga. There are emotional tensions which we can abate also through respiratory awareness. And there are also mental tensions which we can subdue, release through Raja Yoga. And so it seemed to us in France, I don't know how, I would like to know if you use a lot of Patanjali's Raja Yoga, but we devised exercises to create focus in the children. I give you, if I have time, just a short example. That is noises, children put their hands like this, and they try to listen to 3 noises. And then these noises, after that, they have to enumerate. And so it makes them more focused to listen to the lesson. Well, this has been recorded in the book, so I will not insist. And also, a very important point about spirituality and religion. We have written, this is forbidden in the classroom. So the Committee of National Education called me and asked me, well, you want to introduce yoga into the classroom. Okay, but is yoga a spirituality? I said, excuse me, but do you mean that the question bears on, is yoga a religion? Then I said, no, yoga is not a religion. But has it a spirituality? I said, yes, it has, but we are not teaching it in the classroom context. So it means I said something like, what is yoga? Just techniques without any spirituality? Why not? That's something we can answer, because in fact, in yoga, there are techniques bearing on our subjective personality, which have a way to go deep, to awaken the still voice of awareness, of consciousness. And that's the genius of yoga, to have devised these physical and mental techniques. Why not present yoga that way, explaining that we have to learn to leave the world outside, to turn to the world inside. And that those techniques are helping us to establish a balance between Ida and Pingala, that is the inner side and the outer side. So number 7 is the fact that we should refer every exercise we use, even a small exercise, to the tradition. That is, there is not a single exercise of yoga in class which cannot be traced back to the tradition, with a capital T, that is the text. And so with this, I will finish. I will again thank you all for listening and giving me this opportunity to present yoga to the great decision makers in the field of Indian education.
Thank you very much. We should congratulate Subodh and the team for selecting Michael Flak for giving this wonderful experience as to how yoga was brought in education in France. She narrated how the things were brought from 1960s, 1973, when she started. I remember we also started bringing yoga to schools in 1975. And when we started bringing different asanas, people initially showed a lot of interest. But then gradually the interest faded. We had to make yoga very interesting.
Yeah.
For that, as you introduced singing and jokes and others, we also brought different chantings, singing, and the most important, the games, what we call as Krida Yoga, yoga games. This started bringing a lot of interest and started developing, and we started streamlining that. The most important point that you brought out is the aspect of relaxation, which is very, very essential into the whole thing. But many people, as you rightly said, will equate relaxation to laziness. No? Therefore, they think that you should not relax, because it's the world of competition. But our Kaivalyadhama and the research has shown very clearly, and a lot of research by Mahesh Yogi, that relaxation will increase our creativity, our concentration, our memory, and the brain wave functionings. Therefore, relaxation is not tamas, but relaxation is the dimension of sattva. And that, as you rightly pointed out, is a way to develop our total personality. And therefore, we started introducing, and as you rightly said, it is very, very important in the modern time when students are so stressed up at the physical tension, mental things, and all others. Relaxation should become an essential part of the yoga education dimension. And you also rightly pointed out how yoga is not a religion, but the spiritual dimension is equally associated with that. Spirituality is the science. Education, religion could be a cult. So it is not a cult, it is a science of holistic living. Therefore, these aspects that you have brought out are very, very important. And you also brought out that it should be a total personality development, which we started working on. At the physical level, mental level, emotional level, intellectual level, we had to build the total personality of our children. This is what we started introducing and developing different yoga practices, not merely asanas, some special breathing practices, and some kriyas and mudras and bandhas and others in our school education. And our psychologists and child psychiatrists and others came forward to find out what are the dimensions that we have to develop in our young age in the education field. They said, okay, what is very important is eyesight improvement, voice culture in the first level. Then we have to develop the memory, then the IQ, then the creativity, physical stamina. So we developed different programs, modules to develop these aspects. Then how do we know that these modules will work? Then we started doing research. We measured when we give a module for memory, how much of memory is going to increase. Short-range memory, long-range memory, and the audio memory, the visual memory, audio-visual memory. And we found even in about 10-15 days, the audio memory increased by about 24%. Audio-visual memory increased by 21%. And visual memory increased by 18%. And the short-range memory increased by 13%. Long-range memory increased by 9%. All that we documented and we published research papers. Similarly, for all the 10 modules that we developed, we did the research and showed that. And we started introducing in schools in our Arunachal Pradesh, Northeast. That's where the children were belonging to the lowest ebb of evolution. They were almost like cannibals in the tribal region. So how to bring them up to bring it to the highest standard? Yoga worked wonders. And every day we started using in the morning the programs of yoga, the asanas, the meditation, and in the evenings, a lot of yoga, Krida Yoga and others, and we blossomed like beautiful flowers. Today, from that level, all of our Arunachal Pradesh children are most wanted in any schools or colleges. They have gone into the highest levels. This is what we have been able to show. Therefore, your wonderful contribution in France and our work here in India go hand in hand. I really appreciate your wonderful work. Only thing which I wanted to ask you is that the RAI has got the national agreement by the French government does it mean that now yoga is an approved thing in the school education? Has it been approved?
Uh, it has entered workshops that given in all schools, and it is optional.
Yeah.
You say that is people can take music, sports, they can take chess, and yoga. Yoga is in a long line of propositions.
Okay.
And so it did not bring any opposition from anybody because it was part of the curriculum. And now teachers also have the possibility to give classes in their own schools. And they have, of course, the possibility to give a session of yoga in their own classes.
Very good.
So
We started similar thing in India also. We initially started this as optional in various schools, colleges, and also the teachers training program for them. All we started introducing. Now a stage came after the International Day of Yoga that our Prime Minister had told the HRD Minister that we should bring yoga to the school. So the NCERT now has made yoga compulsory from class 6 up to class 12. We developed the syllabus. And similarly, National Council of Teacher Educators. In our country, 14 lakh teachers are trained as teacher educators in our country. And it should also develop national awareness. We should build the service search and brings the transparency and the values in the children. These are all included in our total personality development and dimensions.
So I mean, India will give us the results so that we can
we can give you all the dimensions, and Kaivalyadhama we had number of things, and Moraji Desai National Institute of Yoga, we had a syllabus, and that was developed, and we had a complete conference in which yoga education was brought. All these things have been documented, and Dr. Basu Reddy and our team can give you this, and you can use this as a way to bring yoga as an effective tool.
Important.
Particularly with the International Day of Yoga, it spread all over the world.
Yes.
And France also came in a very big way.
Yes.
I think this is a great opportunity. You can work on that. Now from education at the school level, which she has mentioned, we go to the higher education. How yoga can be brought into higher education, and what are the challenges that we are facing? Have you started using that? Now over to Dr. Ganesh Rao for his presentation.
Yoga has come a long way from its ancient roots, where it was serving the twin purposes of prevention of ill health and preservation of good health. And that for creating a foundation whereby the spiritual goal or the meaning of life could be realized. Today, the popularity of yoga is soaring in geometric progressions, and yoga is making inroads into almost all aspects of our lives. This popularity has got two consequences. One is the dilution of yoga from a lifestyle. It is almost becoming a style of life, a big brand of successful business. On the other side, the beneficial effects of yoga practices and the relevance of yogic philosophical disciplines, the theory behind the practices, they are getting gradually accepted universally, irrespective of caste, creed, race, religion. Everywhere it is getting accepted. In this background, it becomes pertinent and interesting to see how yoga figures in higher education. What I shall be doing in the next half an hour or so is trying to present my thoughts on this subject of yoga and higher education. My thoughts more are in line of being prescriptions, more of an investigative and exploratory nature rather than being descriptive, not as is, where is basis, or to be precise, as can be and as should be. So it is not a surveying of what happens today in higher education as far as yoga is concerned, but what can be the contribution of yoga to higher education. whenever we are introducing any new policies, it is nice to see or at least go into the details of the execution of those policies. Details to the nuts and bolts. When we talk about yoga in higher education, getting into the etymological sense of yoga, not going detail into philosophy, but at least two etymological meanings become very relevant. One in the sense of union, yuju yujati, where without going into the merger of Atman and Brahman, which is not anywhere in yoga or Samkhya, but union or integration of human personality, where the various dimensions of human personality are brought into a wholesome and holistic whole, the physical, the mental, the intellectual, the spiritual. And the second etymological sense of yuja samadhav or concentration, where the significance of this meaning to higher education cannot be overemphasized. But pertinent to point here is that when we talk about yoga as concentration, or yogic concentration to be precise, it is a concentration which is second nature of the mind and not really concentration with which we are familiar, which is object oriented, activity oriented, or circumstance oriented. But leaving aside the etymological meanings, yoga can also be understood in its two aspects. One is the physical practices of yoga, and one is the rationale behind these physical practices, the philosophical or metaphysical foundations of these physical practices. Whenever we talk about yoga in education, whether it is in schools or in higher education, our normal focus as far as practices are concerned is on asanas. But we can see in yoga a whole array of practices, beginning with kriyas, the ashtangas of Patanjali, the mudras, bandhas, the relaxation practices, all of them together form the practice of yoga, not specifically the asanas or the physical postures. So a point has to be made very clearly. When in education we are introducing yoga, all the practices have to be introduced, not only the physical practices of asanas. And when all these practices are introduced, yoga does get the air of holistic discipline, because even if you look at Patanjali's yoga, it caters to, beginning with yamas, the social, the personal, the physical, the physiological, the mental, the psychological, the intellectual, the spiritual aspects. A total rounded personality for the human being from this practices point of view. When we come to the rationale behind these practices, the rational ultimate is of realizing the spiritual goal. I'm specific, asserting what Dr. Micheline Flak just said, spiritual goal, not religious goal. The spiritual goal where the end result is complete elimination of miseries and sufferings. Even if we don't reach that goal, in the process of moving towards that goal, we create a holistic, a happy, a wholesome, a happy human being. Coming to higher education, this term higher education has two parts. One is education and one is higher education. All of us are familiar with what is education, but just to make my mind clear, I am trying to see or define this education. This education can be looked at from 3 points of view. One is, it is the act or process of being educated, act or process of learning a skill or a knowledge. And this definition of education is from the side of the student. Education also is an act or process of educating, imparting of knowledge, training, or skill, wherein the definition caters to the teacher. And finally, education also refers to the subject taught, developing the powers of reasoning or judgment, an instructive or illuminating experience, which also is an education. So, like in any experience, we talk about Triputi. Even in education, we talk about 3 dimensions. the student, the teacher, and the subject taught. When we talk about education in yoga, without knowing, we are paying more attention to the benefits of yoga, to students, and almost ignoring the other two dimensions of education, that is the teachers and the subject taught. Personally, I feel not only the person who is teaching yoga, but even the other teachers or professors in the institutes, colleges, or universities are into yoga, then the way in which yoga can be facilitating higher education increase multifold. It is like in a yoga institute, it is not only the students and the teachers who are involved with yoga, but even the other employees who are there should also be yogic. Then only yoga can get into the higher education in a better manner. So the other two dimensions, the teacher, professors, as well as the subject taught, has to be paid attention, not only the students. The third part is of the subject taught. We are talking about education as a process of transformation of the individual, transformation in such a manner that his thoughts, feelings, and actions go towards leading a good life. This process of transformation caters to all the dimensions: the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, the moral, the social, the aesthetic, and the spiritual, so that one is able to realize the goal of his ideal life, her ideal life, and live that. So, every education, subject of education, has a value part inbuilt into it. So, there is no harm in considering values. Also, when we introduce yoga into higher education, that whole reservation or reluctance or resistance for dealing with yoga only with physical practices and not going into the philosophy part has to be addressed, because every subject in education has a value part. Yoga also has a value part. No harm in recognizing and accepting that value part of yoga. Having delineated as far as the education is concerned, when we come to higher education, we are talking about education which is relevant to after the 10+2 stage. So it is either an undergraduate, a graduate, a postgraduate, a research assistant, teachers. I mean, this is where higher education takes place. We refer to it as post-secondary education or tertiary education, the third level education. And this higher education is imparted in colleges, academies, universities, vocational schools, trainings, career colleges. And at the end of higher education, the student is bestowed with either a certificate or a degree or a diploma. I mean, this is what we are talking about higher education. The point which becomes relevant when we talk about yoga in higher education, which unlike the teachers of yoga for school children face, is that in higher education, the student is of 18 years or above. First point. So that student is capable of introspecting. That student is not susceptible to brainwashing, is not susceptible to indoctrination. And the last point is that the stresses and strains which are inevitable in higher education is much more than the stresses and strains for education in school children. I mean, these factors become very relevant when we consider yoga in higher education. Coming to what is happening today as far as yoga in higher education is concerned, the heart of the paper, the presentation is, does yoga facilitate higher education? If so, how? What are the obstacles, impediments on the path of yoga as far as higher education is concerned? And in what way we can remove these obstacles. Yes, today it is universally accepted that yoga does facilitate higher education. How does it facilitate? We say yoga makes you physically fit, mentally attentive, makes you focused upon a subject, increases your focus or concentration, increases the concentration span, relieves your stress and strain. In general, yoga helps in the learning process. This is accepted. No doubt about it, no debate about it. But after accepting this, what is being done is that a few periods or sessions are allocated to yoga weekly, and under the name of yoga, physical practices are taught. The students may not be educated as to the role that yoga can play in transforming their lives. So just as physical practices are being implemented, the students may find it not interesting. Since it is not mandatory, the attendance may slowly dwindle, and the teacher or the professor of yoga is left with coaxing and cajoling the students, please come and attend the class, and finally left with deep frustration. One side of the story. The second side, unfortunately, only physical practices are implemented, and in the process, the value of yoga and the understanding of yoga is diluted. There seems to be a resistance, a reservation in appreciating the rationale or the philosophy behind those practices. Probably the argument may be that some belief system is being imposed, and students who are brought up in a different belief system, they may find it difficult to accommodate that system. They may run into conflict with their own systems. This becomes a very, very strong issue to be addressed when we talk about yoga in higher education. Coming to what can be done, maybe a prescription. The significance of yoga in higher education begins with the recognition of the mental and psychological situation of a student of higher education. First, such a student is capable of introspection, thinking, but may be ill-equipped to think, may be immature to think. He or she needs to develop farsight, foresight, and insight. This is where yoga can come into the picture. The second point, today it seems that the students are going physically and biologically much faster than emotionally. And if sufficient emotional grounding is not provided, then that student of higher education runs the risk of running into an emotional mess in relationships, in life in general. He or she does require an emotional grounding, emotional foundation. The third point, the stresses and strains of higher education are inevitable, and the higher one goes, the more the stress and strain. This, as well as the demands of the curriculum, lead to an isolation of the student from the family, from the society at large, the burden of the studies. And this gets transformed, degenerated into loneliness and helplessness. And if the student of higher education is staying in a hostel without the emotional support of the family, then he or she is left alone to to fend for himself or herself. At the end of the day, it is actually the need of the hour to introduce yoga into higher education for these students. But the question still remains, can we just introduce yoga, only the physical practices of yoga, without the philosophy behind the practices? Are we not considering you or converting those physical practices into pseudo yoga, unyogic in nature? Is it not time to go into the philosophical doctrines and get rid of the fear that it is not really conversion into any particular religion, Hindu religion at that? Incidentally, being a student of philosophy, I wish to make a point that there is no religion like Hinduism. Unlike Christianity or Islam or Buddhism, there is nothing like Hinduism, a religion. Hinduism is an umbrella term. There may be so many Hindus here, all of us are professing different faiths in different gods, different systems of life. Where is Hindu religion as such? Is it not time to realize that, okay, there is no conversion there, no fear there? If we consider yoga as a spirituality, then is there the same reservation? And how many of us can say we are not spiritual? Just one moment of thought. If we say we are not exhausted by only body and mind, there is something more in us, then we are spiritual. That something more need not be God. Patanjali's yoga, to the extent I understand it, provides the grammar of all spiritualities. Being familiar with Zen, Sufism, Christian mysticism, with great heart and pride, we can say it provides the groundwork for all spiritualities. And the baseless fear of identifying spirituality with religion has to be removed immediately. Where religion is organized, spirituality is individualistic. In yoga, there is no form of worship, no rites, no rituals, which normally form a part of any religion. And today, the concept of secular spirituality is very prominent. Spirituality is my equation with my idea of what is beyond my body and mind. As simple as that. My spirituality may make me feed the dogs on the road, the stray dogs. Another person's spirituality may make him tend the plants in the garden. Another may find solitude being spiritual. At the end of the day, all of us are looking for peace of mind, happiness, and spirituality is one means of going towards that. And if we appreciate yoga from a spiritual dimension, then these reservations can be kept at rest. In fact, without appreciating the philosophical principles behind yoga, we may be depriving the students of higher education a very optimum way of fulfilling their spiritual aspirations. At the end of the day, after our material aspirations are fulfilled, we still feel a nagging lack in us. And that is what we talk about spirituality. So what better way to fulfill than get into yoga in the proper mode of yoga, understand the discipline, the philosophical principles behind it, the metaphysical foundations behind it, and then not only higher education becomes enriched, enjoyable, but we end up preparing a good human being of a student of higher education. This question has to be addressed, and in this context, the onus of higher education and yoga in higher education falls squarely on the institutes of yoga, reputed institutes of yoga, whereby the teachers who are being generated They have in-depth knowledge of the philosophy. So there is no question of misunderstanding. There is no question of brainwashing. We are very clear on what yoga stands for. That is where the onus of the institutions, schools, colleges of yoga have to fulfill. Coming to my last 2 points, I said the definition of definition of education is also imparting of education. And the role of the teachers, not only yoga teachers, general teachers in higher education, as far as yoga is concerned, becomes very crucial, because if they are yogic, then the teaching becomes yogic. Not only the practices. Today, what we do in colleges, schools, we employ a fitness expert as a yoga teacher and make him do asana practices and say one lecture, one session, one period of yoga is there, and we fulfill the demands of the curriculum, 2 sessions, 3 sessions per week. If the teacher is grounded into yoga philosophy, then automatically it goes down into the students. Today, one more field is completely open when we consider yoga and higher education. And that is, yoga itself is becoming higher education. We have universities, as Vyasa is there, number of universities coming up as yoga universities. So, higher education in yoga will go towards helping yoga in higher education. These universities, these institutes, these academies, which are catering to higher education in yoga, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhDs in yoga, they can become the teachers of yoga and cater to the students of higher education in a nice manner. A very nice, sattvic career option is open when these universities are catering towards higher education in yoga. Thank you very much for patient listening.
Thank you very much, Ganesh. You really brought out the triptych of education: students, teachers, and the subject. So when we look at the students, it is the learning aspect. When you look at the teachers, it is the teaching aspect. And the subject, the contents, most important. So the teachers should have that experience. Upadekshanti te gnanam, gnaninaha tattvadarshinaha, it said. They should be scholars. At the same time, they must be realized people. It is not merely they know about the subject of yoga, but they should have been practicing it and use that as a transformational process. Then only they will become teachers according to the Shastras. And the subject content. Rightly he pointed out that the subject that we have to introduce at a higher level should be with a greater understanding, greater philosophical content, not merely as physical training dimensions. Physical is no doubt important, but the importance is understanding as to why we do asana, why we do pranayama, why we do mudras, bandhas, kriyas, and other things, and the mechanisms involved in that has to be brought forth. A lot of research has undergone, and when Kaivalyadhama started, Swami Kaivalyadhama brought this dimension as the key, and he is a pioneer in that. And he said, so research should be brought forth, and then only we understand the implications of these various yoga practices. At that time, when there were hardly big instruments and sophisticated instruments as we have now, he was able to bring about the essential features of deep relaxation, calmness of mind, and bringing the dimensions of balance at the prana level. And all these things he was able to bring about in the Yoga Mimamsa, the research journal that was started. Starting from that pioneering thing, Maharishi Mahishogi brought the importance of meditation and how meditation brings about the harmonization of the brain and how it brings about the alpha wave patterns, as she was mentioning. And the meditational aspect is very, very important in transforming the persons. Because we all know what is good, what is bad. But why do we do bad things? Why do we become corrupt? Why these scams? Because the mind has gone uncontrolled. The speed up mind, we have no control. So yoga says yoga chittavritti nirodha, in which you have mastery over the mind. Can you slow down the uncontrolled speed of the mind? That's the most important. For that, all the practices like the pranayama, slowing up the breath and calming up the mind and emotional stability, all these things help. Jnana yoga, Raj yoga, Bhakti yoga, Karma yoga, all these things help to calm down the mind, and therefore you get the strength and the willpower to face the situation. When you are encountered with all the wonderful, luring aspects of corruption, a big engineer is faced, okay, I'm going to give you, 1 crore of rupees if you sanction my project, Can he stand to values and transparency and say, no, I'm not going to give that. I will choose the best for my these things. It can happen when you have the control and mastery over the mind. Transparency and values are most important, and this is promoted by gaining mastery over the mind, which yoga says. Therefore, this has to be brought forth in the higher education system if you want to bring real transparency and values at the higher level. Considering all these things, the University Grant Commission in 1991 said that we want to bring yoga into education at the higher level. And they said, okay, the famous institutions can start this yoga as the optional subject, and we'll give you some grants to put up some buildings, and we fund 2 teachers to bring yoga. Let it be optional. Let anybody can come and learn. And Kaivalyadhama took, I think, almost 12 centers, and we took about 8 centers, and others also took totally about 24 centers in university campuses. Yoga were started. And the result of that, after 5 years of this thing, was that people liked it. Teachers came, students came, their families came. They all said, yes, yoga is very, very necessary. Then the university said, okay, now we'll start departments of yoga in different universities. Then every department had their own board of studies, and they started their own syllabus and started bringing this dimension. And as Ganesh was mentioning, some universities brought more emphasis on physical dimensions, but predominantly most of the universities, departments, they started bringing the holistic dimension, not just physical, but there were pranayam, there were meditation, there were philosophical aspect, and Patli Yoga Sutra was taken, and Hatha Pradipika were all taught, and these things were brought forth in essentially. Then in another 5 years, the government decided, yes, we should have University of Yoga. Bihar Yoga Bharati was the first to become the yoga university. Unfortunately, it has to be wounded up after 5 years due to a lot of political and other constraints. And this university ours we started in 2002, in which our objective was to bring the real essence of yoga to the higher education system, into all aspects of higher education. So we said we have the areas of yoga and spirituality, yoga and life sciences, yoga and management studies, yoga and physical sciences, yoga and the humanities. Into all these fields, how yoga can enter. The big challenge was how to prepare the syllabus. And we worked on that for last 5 years and brought out the syllabus for that. We had to bring in the yoga dimension and the modern education system. For example, we teach quantum mechanics. We bring about the Upanishadic concept of consciousness. We teach the Patli Yoga Sutra. We bring the aspects of modern psychology and parapsychology. And we teach, for example, the mathematics. Then we have higher mathematics of yoga-related dimension. Architecture, we bring the Vastu dimension. Then aspect of time, we have the astrological dimension, medical thing. So we have to build the Indian Eastern wisdom base with the Western dimension of education. So we had Professor N.V.C. Swami, who was the director of IIT, who joined us, and we all sat together and started working on that. We have brought nearly 250 such books to see that the yogic dimension are brought into all aspects of life, into art, music, dance, drama, into management system, into the physical sciences, into the life sciences. Everywhere we had to bring in the yoga dimension to make it a very comprehensive dimension. And the corresponding research is most important. As Swami Vivekananda said, education should be the manifestation of perfection already in man, he said. And it's to bring total personality development, physical, mental, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. So the objective of education is not just to impart only the syllabus, but it has to be bringing about the transformation in the people. And for that, as he rightly emphasized, and also as Flak was mentioning, the most important is teachers. teachers, teachers, teachers. So we gave maximum emphasis on teachers training. For example, when we started our yoga in schools in Arunachal Pradesh, the first thing was when we selected the teachers, we give them intensive training in yoga for 6 months, apart from training in the different subjects. So when they went back to the schools, they were able to bring forth this in the schools. Not only that, there should be a continuing yoga education, just like CME. Therefore, every year, for 1 month in Arunachal Pradesh, we used to bring the best of the teachers in different subjects, including yoga. And 1 month intensive training every year. Therefore, every subject who is teaching, maybe mathematics or physics or chemistry or geography, they'll be updated what is happening in the world at large by the best of the teachers in the whole country. Similarly, the teachers at the higher education should be given this training continuously. For that, we started the higher dimensions like the doctoral program, the master's program, and others. And in the doctoral program, we have intensive research that has to be done. And the research should be very relevant to the modern society to meet the challenges that we face today. And we have to unearth what has been there in our ancient system and test it with the tools of modern research. Therefore, we have the modern research combined with the ancient system. For example, if somebody wants to work on, say, memory, they have to find out what is the concept of memory, how it can be developed, what are the obstacles, and what are the tools that yoga uses for developing the memory. So they go into all the shastras. Therefore, our students are well versed in Sanskrit, in all the texts of yoga, and they will unearth and find out what are the concepts that have been given by our ancient seers. And at the other side, we come to the research lab in which they measure the memory and see how the memory can be increased, what are the hurdles, and actual by measurement we show that. Therefore, combining the West and the East, the best of the East with the best of the West, we have to bring forth. So all these things have to be brought at the higher education, the research dimension, which is not there at the school level. School level, what we need is good teachers and who show that as role models. But here, it should be research dimension also brought forth along with the dimension of role models of the schools, of the college, university level. This is what we have been doing and continuing research and research and research. And now the government has been able to bring yoga through the NCTE and also NCRT at the school level. Now, we have been talking to the UGC chairman and the HRD minister that now the time has come, we have to bring it to the university level. Therefore, we are going to have a meeting on 2nd, and about 20 vice chancellors from the central universities are all coming to Prashanti Kutiram, and we are going to find out how best this yoga can be introduced at the university level. And our HRD Minister Smriti Irani also is coming. She is going to chair this series of talks, and they are very, very keen that we have to bring from this session itself. From the next August session, just like NCRT is bringing and NCT are bringing, at the university level also yoga should be brought with its dimensions up. So there should be the threefold aspect, the teachers, the students, the subject aspect, and the research dimension. All will be included at the university level. And again, just like we have been able to bring some uniformity and standardization of the different yoga programs at the school level, thanks to Baswareddy and all our team, our Hamsaji and O.P. Tiwari and all of us sat together again and again for several meetings and we were able to bring some sort of standardization. This is the greatest thing that we have been able to do in the country over the last several decades. A similar thing has to be done at the university level to bring the sort of standardization of all this dimension, not to lose the pristine purity, the holistic vision of yoga, but to see that you are incorporated into the entire syllabus of the university. And we are going to form a technical committee and hold the procedures, just like we have been able to do in our school education. Same procedure will be followed. And the first policy decision will be made by HRD ministers, UGC chairman, and the NAC director. They are all coming. And those people who are interested, they are all welcome to see that. I think Haradi is there and he should come also. Tiwari also should be there. And see that we bring about the policy decision to bring in yoga at the university level. First we start at the central university level, then bring it to all the university level. And our Smriti Irani, HRD minister, is very keen that it should come fast. In the next 5 years, it should come to at least 20 universities, yoga in the pristine purity forum in the holistic vision. Because we have been able to see that our Prime Minister have been able to bring yoga in the International Day of Yoga throughout the world, making yoga really Indian back again. And therefore, this is our greatest contribution of the India to the world thought and culture. This had to be brought forth at the world level. Therefore, it has to come to the university level, and we'll have a large number of teachers who come up. Unless we have good teachers who are well-trained, we will not be able to bring it to the school level and other levels, as she rightly pointed. Teachers training. Teachers are most important. So that way, the university has to bring about the curriculum and syllabus and others. And in the technical committee, we are going to forum. We are going to take all the most important yoga masters in the country. And this is how we have to bring and synergize all the best that have been achieved in the country to form a nice syllabus. And in the next maybe a year or so, we'll be able to bring about such a syllabus and see that we start this thing at the university level. And that is what is happening to the government. And this government is very, very progressive and very, very happy that yoga is brought at the education level, at the primary level, secondary level, and now higher education level is coming up. And I welcome all the participants and delegates who have come different parts of the world to take advantage of this. We have brought out the books on the NCTE for the teacher educators, and we have got the books for NCERT for the school, and the research that has undergone can all be brought forth. And thereby, the government is making a big stroll in bringing yoga to the education field. Because Swami Vivekananda believed, unless you bring yoga into education, the transformation will not occur. India will not become the greatest. India has to take this thing to bring yoga all over the world. As pointed out by Ganesh, we have to bring in the dimension of values, transparency, and synergy. And the children who are suffering so much at the higher education level should be removed of their stresses. When I was in Australia, I was so unhappy to see that 30% of the young teenagers are suffering from depression. In an age where they should be bubbling with joy, enthusiasm, energy, dynamism, they've all become zombies. So the federal government got so concerned about it, and they formed a big project about 15 years back in Melbourne. I was on that day, and the Prime Minister came, and he said, we are going to start a project named as Beyond Blue. And they kept $100 million for that project, brought the best of the psychiatrists of Sydney University, made him the director, and said, okay, in the next 10 years, we should bring down this thing from 30 years, 30% down to a zero, or maybe 2-3%. And all support we are going to give. Don't worry about the money, infrastructure, everything we'll give you. There was a huge building for that in Melbourne. And it was a very big gala function they had 15 years back. Recently, last year, when I was in Australia, I met the director. How is the situation? Have you been able to reduce? No, sir. What has happened? From 30% it increased to 35%. Why? Because they don't have the total understanding as to how the depression occurs. And the modern psychiatric modalities will not solve the problem. It's only yoga that can bring out the dimension, and a lot of work has undergone, and through yoga we'll be able to bring down that. Recently, the National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience, our Dr. Gangadhar is going to become the director. He brought out a wonderful compendium of all the research that have gone for depression, for schizophrenia, for others, and this was brought out in the Psychiatry Journal of the highest repute. And the whole issue was only on yoga and mental health. And this has to be brought forth and used effectively. And Kaivalyadhama has brought such a wonderful foundation for the whole thing, and all yoga institutions should see that it's emulated, and with the research that we are doing, we are prepared to have collaboration with large number of institutions to do the research to see this done. And our conference on 3rd to 7th, we are addressing 4 main ailments, that is diabetology, oncology, cardiology, and mental health. And how to combine the best of the Western system with the Eastern system. The modern medicine, what is the best that it can offer, and Ayush, what it can offer best. Both these things we have to combine together and form a new healthcare delivery policy, which should be evidence-based, which should be very effective, with least side effects, and most important, cost-effective. In our country, we can't afford to have only modern healthcare delivery system, which is escalating the cost. Even the UK, which gives NHS free health, they are suffering that the costs are going up so high, they can't manage. And in the United States, the Obama ministry has told that we are going to cut down the contribution that we give for the health managers, and from $2 billion, we reduce it to only $1.25 billion. They're all concerned how to develop a cost-effective system. It's here that yoga comes into picture to bring in the dimension of cost-effectiveness, and thereby we'll be able to deliver. So yoga has a great promise, as he rightly pointed out in his beginning of the introduction, that yoga has become popular. Now it is the responsibility of all our yoga masters, not only in India, but abroad, like Flak and many others who have been working on this dimension, to see that the real essential aspect of yoga is brought forth, and wonderful people like Amrit Suryanandji and Swami Maheshwaranandji and many others all over the world have been bringing out yoga, but the essential feature has to be brought forth. And thanks to our Rajan Narayan, he is bringing the Council of Yoga Accreditation International, and in India we have brought this Indian Yoga Association, in which all the major yoga masters are brought forth, for which our O.P. Tiwari is the chairman of the Indian Yoga Association, and all of you should become members for the CIA, and at the international level, members for the CYA International. Thereby, the strength of this holistic vision of yoga, which we are trying to bring about, combining all the yoga masters in the country and the world, will become a reality. And in the next 1 year, our O.P. Tiwari and we all dream that we should have not less than 1 million members in our IYA and CYAI. Then it will have a big force to see that it brings all over the world. Therefore, I appeal to all the delegates here to see that you become members. A very, very nominal thing OPT has put, and see that you become members for IYA and also CYA International. And once again, I congratulate Lonavala for organizing this beautiful conference, the most relevant conference in yoga and education, and giving us a chance to share our views, and a right choice of bringing our Flak, because she has been working from 1973, and to our Ganesh at the higher education, who has given pristine purity thoughts. Once again, thank you all very much for patient hearing, and we conclude by thanking both the presenters who have done a wonderful job in this dimension.
But just to, when you talk about yoga in education, the essence of spirit is the essence of man. And yoga is essentially spiritual. Spirit is the essence of man, and yoga is essentially spiritual. If you forget this dimension in any format, and the ultimate end product is not going to be yoga, in the name of yoga we are giving something. This is one I feel. That's one thing. Second one is any practice of yoga. It may be asana, it may be a shatkarma or anything. So we may start from the physical aspect, but nowhere in any yoga text it is mentioned it is for physical only. All are holistic. The teachers, it's my understanding, teachers has to be emphasized. Again we are talking only one dimension. Asana means it is physical. Not at all. Sthiram sukham, where is sukha? Is it for physical or mental? So if you see any aphorism, there is no mention that it is only for physical or it is only for mental, it is only for intellectual.
Yes, you are very right. Spirituality, the total dimension.
Yes, that
it has to be brought forth. That's the pristine purity of yoga.
That's only one
Correct.
aspect I would like to
Yes,
emphasize. Otherwise, the entire essence of yoga, I use the word essence.
Absolutely.
If you are leaving the essence, and there is no meaning in giving the
Absolutely
yoga.
correct.
Thank you.
Asanas are not merely physical, it is the total. Similarly, pranayama is also holistic.
Yes.
Every aspect of yoga is holistic.
Yes.
This is what Swami Kaivalyadhama has brought right from beginning. That pristine purity of the holistic dimension has to be brought forth. You are very right, Basareddy ji. Wonderful.
I would like to mention that in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, when Patanjali describes the Ashtanga Yoga, he has avoided the term Abhyasa. He has introduced the new term, that is Anushtana. And that is what the Vasareddy ji said. It go in accordance with that thought, that it is a Anushthan. When we are talking about the asana, it is like a yogic tree, As you said in the beginning, it is a beautiful. But we have to pay attention to this fact that Patanjali has avoided the term Abhyasa. It is not that Abhyasa. It is Anushtana. We have to be in tune with it. And then only we will be successful. So in addition to his thought.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
After listening to both the plenary speakers and the chair, on this extremely crucial topic of today, we should all take a vow to introduce yoga to schools, colleges, and higher learning institutions in whatever capacity we can. Thank you, doctors.